I know that this title seems pretty extreme, but I want to explain using my story of how losing my vision has forced me to change my mindset and relationship with the way I approach monotonous and tedious tasks as a producer when it comes to getting work and becoming a full-time producer. In this video, I want to go through the journey of what it looked like from 0 to a 10K month in terms of what my mindset was and what my relationship to doing work was during those periods, and how it reflected the revenue that we were generating each of those months. And by the end of this story, I hope that we come to the same reflection on how I changed my mindset and relationship to approaching hard work and the results it ultimately generated. This video is split into a year-long journey starting from the end of January 2025 to the end of January 2026. So you're probably wondering what I even mean by the title of this video, and for context, my name is Joe, and in 2019 I was diagnosed with a macular degenerative disease known as Stargardt's disease, which is slowly taking my central vision, and it all started with my diagnosis from an eye specialist who sat me down one day to tell me that I would never be able to drive, that I'd never be in the trades, I'd never be in the army, and I'd never be a pilot. At the time, this was quite a reality shock to me, as I already felt quite hopeless in my prospects for life, because all I cared about back then was playing video games, and that was about it. Like, that's all I look forward to. And so when this doctor told me that I couldn't do even more things, I felt even more hopeless, and in turn I fell into a pretty strong depression for about a year or so. In that time, I began listening to a lot of Joji, and it wasn't until I started listening to Joji in these depressive states that I started really connecting to the beats that he was making, and I just loved how simple and lo-fi and distorted they sounded. And it really inspired me to try and make some beats of my own. If it wasn't for this diagnosis, I'm not even sure I would get into music production. It was in this period that all I wanted to do was make beats. That's all I cared about. I remember an interesting story where I was going to be a PT, and the gym I went to offered to pay for my PT course, but I remember not showing up to the interview because all I wanted to do was make beats. But because of my condition, looking at screens for extended periods of time gives me intense migraines, and this is something that I want you to remember for later on in the story. Fast forward to the end of 2024, and I slogged through a 4-year degree that I absolutely hated every second of. But as soon as I finished that, I convinced a friend that I studied with to move to Melbourne and pursue music production with me. We literally had no plan except that, to be honest. Like, we hadn't really discussed a plan anyway. We were kind of just doing that. And the only way that I knew that we could potentially get work was sending DMs to artists through Instagram. I had started businesses in the past where I used cold DMs to get work, so I just knew that if I applied the same principles into this business, I don't see why it wouldn't work. Because ultimately what it came down to is letting people know that we exist and letting people know that we have something to offer them and something to help them in their creative process. In this period, I started off by religiously doing 20 DMs a day for multiple weeks, and after about 3 weeks in, we managed to get some calls, some discovery calls. Even back then, we were not very good. It was more so just letting people know we exist. We would say that we had a demo for them, which we actually didn't. We'd just make it when we booked the call. We would say that we had an idea for them, and only once we booked the call, we would actually make the idea. And I remember specifically, we booked 3 calls, we made 3 demos, and they were not very good. 2 of them fell through. One of them we actually managed to close, and it was our first ever production project that we closed at 1.2K. For me, that completely broke my belief of how much you could actually charge as a producer, because up until that point, I had tried type beats and samples, and you sell a lease for maybe $30, and you don't really even make. I made a few sales on collab sales doing samples, but other than that, I had never released any packs that were paid. It was at this point I had complete faith that sending DMs would be a guaranteed method of getting us work, so I wanted to double down on this strategy. I quickly realized that sending 20 DMs a day was just not going to cut it in terms of getting to our 10K goal. So I realized in order to get there, we need to increase the amount of DMs that we were sending. And that number moved from 20 to, I want to say 50, but realistically at this time it was 35 to 40, to be quite frank. But even then, I realized the first ceiling. The already tedious amount of time that I would spend to try and find 20 people to message, now I had to try and find around 35 to 40, which was almost doubling the amount of time that I was spending on trying to find the artist and think of what to say. To be honest, even the 20 DMs for me was kind of annoying, and I really disliked doing it, but I just knew that if we sat down and did the DMs, we would get the work, but I was starting to feel a little bit burnt out trying to do 35 to 40. It was at this period we were around 4 to 5k. The hidden cost of all this was, although I knew that it worked, it slowly built anger within me. It made me feel a dissonance about the action that I was doing because it was so repetitive and so tedious and monotonous that I started feeling like a bot. I would just sit there for hours and hours doing the same repetitive tasks. I felt like a slave. I felt like a clanker, a Joe-bot. And it was at this time, sadly, when it came to the weekend, I would be excited because I didn't do any DMs on Saturday and Sunday. As soon as it came to Sunday night, I would have this impending doom and sense of dread that I would have to wake up tomorrow and do the DMs. I remember at nights, I would just try and get ahead of the days when I had some downtime and try and lead source all the artists for the next few days. Even then, the will to do those things continuously and consistently completely diminished at this time. Once again, this was our North Star strategy to get all our work, and it was the way that we were getting all of our work. It was in this period that I actually started hitting that 50. I was militaristic about hitting that number. I would wake up at 6 a.m. As soon as I opened my eyes, I would get my laptop and I would go to the kitchen. I would sit there and I would not do anything else until I hit that number. And man, did this create some frustration in me. To make this even work, I stopped training because I just had no energy to do that. And when I mean training, going to the gym and running. I stopped eating well because I couldn't be bothered. To me, all that was important was scaling this business. All I could do to scale that was to make sure that we hit this number. And it was around this period where I was working 8 to 12 hours a day on just finding the artist and sending the first DM. It was completely draining me to the point where I didn't want to hang out with anyone. I was miserable and grumpy to be around most of the time. I never wanted to hang out with my girlfriend. Or when I did, all I wanted to do was rot. And for her, that created a lot of tension within our relationship. But she understood that this was draining. Regardless, it just meant that I couldn't be a good boyfriend. And to top this all off, because what I mentioned before with the migraines, this is when the migraines started kicking in heavily. I think it was potentially the stress that I was under, plus intensely looking at screens for such an extended period of time, that around an hour or even 30 minutes sometimes, or even literally like 10 minutes after waking up, I would get this pain right behind my eye. It would be a throbbing pain that wouldn't go away for hours and hours, and I would have to sit through doing the DMs and finding these people while I had this intense migraine. I remember this migraine would happen just before sessions sometimes. I legitimately could not even participate in the session. I would just have to go lie down or go non-verbal because it was so irritating to me that I could not contribute creatively. In turn, really affecting my authenticity as a producer, because when you want to be a full-time producer, you don't necessarily sign up to trying to find artists and DMing all day. You kind of want to actually produce as well. But I had just no energy for any of that, and I knew that my importance in the business was to make sure we were hitting the number, the KPI, key performance indicator, of getting to that DM amount. But it was at this period I was so sick of my situation that I wanted to do anything that I could to get myself out of the situation. So I started looking into different ways of how I could potentially automate finding the artists. I knew there had to be a better way. There had to be a better way than what I was doing right now. And I was determined to find out. And this is when I found out about automation. I went down this rabbit hole of automation and lead generation through the depths of data scraping YouTube niches. After literal months and months of iterations, I had created my first prototype of the system, the artist alignment system that we use today. This system completely broke my belief because not only could it find artists faster than I ever could manually, but it also came up with a complement that I would need to spend 2 to 3 minutes thinking of sometimes, which was completely blowing my mind. It's interesting because 1 year later, exactly almost 1 year later, we were able to hit our first 10K plus month because we had this fully automated system. The month before, I think, was pretty week. It was only 5K. However, during that period, I had set up this system so that now not only was it finding me the artist, it was sending the messages, it was coming up with the first compliment, and I would just let this run, and I'd literally go to the gym again, or I'd literally just go and do my groceries or live life or do something else. In that period, I was like, oh man, I don't know if this really works because our revenue isn't that great this month. I just kept my belief in the system, and in January, it was where the results started showing, because it was one of the highest DM months I'd had ever done. I think it was around 1,000 or something, and it was the highest month we'd had ever hit. And within a year of trying to take production seriously, we were able to hit our first 10K plus month. And of course the revenue is great, but I think the ultimate thing that I had unlocked and had proof for now was the ideology of systems thinking and automations to completely get my authenticity back, because not only that, I could just focus on things that I actually wanted to focus on, being more present in a session, or building out a better system, or going to the gym. I kind of felt guilty sometimes that I would just go to the gym and this thing would be running, because I had indoctrinated myself into brute forcing through doing DMs for so long that the fact that I didn't really have to do them to the same level I was before felt like I was cheating. So I felt guilty for the lack of time that I was spending on this, but it was really because I had trouble accepting my new reality, which was way better. And it wasn't until I changed my relationship to what I believed to be leverage and hard work that I actually started seeing more results. I became a happier person to be around. Interestingly, had I not been diagnosed with this condition, I'm not sure we would ever even be in this position, or if I'd be making this video. So in a weird way, I am grateful for what has happened to me, and it is kind of a weird blessing in disguise. Now it's my mission to help producers get their time freedom back in the pursuit of going full-time or making income online as a producer, so that they can unlock their full authenticity of what it actually means to be a producer and not spend their time doing tedious, monotonous tasks, so that they can focus on things like instrument playing, building out artist relationships, focusing on making better beats, doing more sessions, getting better at sales, building out a cool system. Anything that isn't this tedious, monotonous work that honestly made me so angry and almost made me quit multiple times, to be honest. So if you're interested in getting this system for yourself, and you want to know what the video is, and you want to see the system in action, there'll be a pop-up on the top right or at the end, or you can simply DM me or comment Iris on Instagram, and I'll send you the resource myself.